Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Avinash Giroya. Today we are going to learn about clinical examination of cranial nerves 1, 3, 4 and 6. Okay, so in first few seconds of the video, I have given you a clear vision of the board, right? So if I am blocking the vision of the board, then what you can do is take a screenshot in the start of the video and use that as your reference. Okay. So what we are going to do is I'm going to give you a basic physiology of all the cranial nerves that I mentioned, and after we are done with the basic physiology, we will move on to the practical examination. How to test this cranial nerves in a real patient scenario. Okay. So let's start with cranial nerve 1. What is the first cranial nerve? First cranial nerve is the olfactory nerve, right? So prerequisite here is you need to know all the cranial nerves. 1 to 12 cranial nerves, right? That is the basic. There is also a very good mnemonic for that. There are multiple mnemonics, so it's very easy to remember that nowadays. So first cranial nerve is the olfactory nerve. Now let's look at some details of olfactory nerve. It originates from the olfactory epithelium, right? The function of olfactory nerve is pure sensory nerve, right? Which is olfaction. Okay. So what is olfaction? Sense of smell, right? Very easy. Next is what happens if there is a defect of olfactory nerve. Now you need to remember three things, okay? Anosmia, parosmia and hyposmia. See, it's osmia and osmia, right? All you need to remember is ano, paro and hypo. Let's look at it one by one. What is hypo? Hypo means reduction, right? Hypo means less, reduction. So reduction of sense of smell, right? So it's the patient won't be able to smell a strong smell, right, or a strong fragrance. Parosmia means alteration in character. You are asking the patient to smell a pungent smell and he is smelling a sweet smell, right? So that is the alteration in character. Next is anosmia, no smell, complete absence, anosmia, right? So three basic things in olfactory nerve, right? That's it. Next we are going to look at the other three musketeers, I call them, that are the three cranial nerves, that is cranial nerve 3, 4 and 6. Okay. Now cranial nerve 3, 4 and 6 are mixed nerves. They have motor as well as sensory function. Right. From where do they originate? They originate from series of nuclei in the floor of sylvian aqueduct up to the fourth ventricle. This is just a fact you need to remember, right? You will learn details of this more on the neuroanatomy part. Movements of two eyes that occur symmetrically. Now, okay, you are seeing me. I am moving from this side to this side in the video. So your eyes are moving from left to right symmetrically, right? That is conjugate movements, right? So conjugate movements. How if there is no conjugate movements? Your eyes don't move symmetrically. One eye will be looking other side, other eye will be looking other side. If that happens, what is that known as? That is known as squint, right? What is squint? Visual axes do not meet at a same point. Okay. Now, if you are looking at a particular object, try looking at a particular object around you, right? Your both eye will focus at the same time at the same object. How if your one eye is looking at other object and other side, and your other eye is looking at other side? You will have diplopia, double vision. You won't be able to see, right? So that is squint. Okay. So conjugate movement is very important. Now remember this because we are going to use that as a basis of further explanations. Okay. Now how do you test these three nerves? Now we know the origin of the nerve. We know that they are mixed nerves, sensory and motor both. We know that the movements of the eye together is known as conjugate movements. Now if a real patient comes to you and you want to test these three nerves, how will you start? Okay, so I have divided this in 3 steps, 1, 2 and 3. First step is what you have to look for. Again, clinical examination, first step is basic inspection, right? So we start with, we ask the patient to sit at a particular place and you just observe the patient. So what do you see? Do you see ptosis? What is ptosis? Ptosis is drooping of eyelids. Right? You will feel like the patient is sleepy, but no. If you observe, the ptosis is only unilateral, it's only one side of the eye, right? So there could be bilateral ptosis, but usually it is unilateral. So you know that the patient is not sleepy. This is actually drooping of eyelids or ptosis. right? Next, as I mentioned, if the eyes are not moving in a same visual axis, that is known as squint, right? Next is nystagmus. What is nystagmus? Nystagmus is to and fro movements of the eye, right? So to and fro jerky movements of the eye is known as nystagmus. Now there are multiple causes of nystagmus, right? It is concerned with the ear also, and it is also concerned with the brain. So we won't dwell into the reasons of that. Okay. So we are done with inspection. So we are done with looking at the eye, right? We are just done inspecting the patient. That what could be the abnormal things you can just get from looking at the patient. Next is the test for ocular movements. Now, movements of the eye are the most important. For you need to first know the muscles of the eye to understand the movements of the eye. What are the muscles of the eye? There are 6 basic muscles you need to know. That is superior, inferior, medial, and lateral rectus. Okay, so it is superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial, and lateral rectus. Another is the oblique, superior oblique and inferior oblique. So each eye has 6 muscles, right, for ocular movements. How do you remember the innervation of these muscles? It is LR6, SO4, and others like cranial nerve 3. Now what is this? It means LR6 means lateral rectus is innervated by cranial nerve 6. Superior oblique is innervated by cranial nerve 4 and others by cranial nerve 3. Okay. Now knowing the movements or the function of the muscle is again a very deep topic. We are not going to dwell into that, right? But basic function I will tell you: superior oblique elevation, inferior oblique depression, medial rectus will converge the eye, and lateral rectus will diverge the eye. Okay, so that is medial movement and lateral movement. Okay. Superior oblique is concerned with downward and inward movement of the eye, and inferior oblique is concerned with the upward and outward movement of the eye. Okay, so that is those are the basic movements of the muscle, function of the muscle, and the basic innervation of the muscle. Okay, remember this formula; it's very easy. Lateral rectus by 6th cranial nerve, superior oblique by 4th cranial nerve, and other muscles are by 3rd cranial nerve. Okay. Now we are done with inspection. We are done with the movements. Right? How are we going to check the movements? We will look in the clinical examination. Now let's look at the examination of pupil. How do you examine the pupil? You ask the patient to sit in front of you, right? The room should be illuminated properly. It should not be very bright light. It should not be very dim light. Okay. First, you look at the size of the pupil. Are the size symmetrical in bilateral eyes? Next, you look at the shape of the pupil. Is it circular? Okay. This shape can change in many ocular manifestations, where the iris can maybe sticks to the lens, which is iritis. Okay. So all this inflammation of iris and all these things can cause change in shape of the pupil. Next is pupillary reflex, also known as visual reflex. So in this visual reflex, we are going to see pupillary reflex, which is direct, and consensual light reflex. We will see how we perform this in the practical examination. Okay. Next, after the examination of the pupil, we will look at the accommodation reflex. Now, what is accommodation reflex? It is used for near vision. Okay, let's do this. If you are sitting in front of a desktop or a phone or anything, right? Try to look at a distant object away from you, right? And then suddenly look at your screens, because obviously your screens will be near to you, will be close to you, right? So look at a far object and suddenly move your eyes to the near object like screen or phone or any object like pen. Like I am seeing, for example, I am seeing away. My pen is here, and then directly I look at the pen. Right? My eyes will accommodate. How do they accommodate? They accommodate by contraction of the ciliary muscles. Now, how does this happen? It happens through cranial nerve 3. We will look at the pathways further. Okay. It occurs through contraction of ciliary muscles, which will increase the diopter of the lens, right? That is, the power of the lens will increase, and the converging power of the lens will increase. It will converge the light into the retina, right? Next is constriction of pupils, that happens to restrict the light coming into the pupil, right? Because we just want the central rays coming in. Next is the convergence, that happens through medial rectus. Remember I told you medial rectus converge the eyeballs. So hence helps to focus image on fovea centralis. Now all these three aspects happen as a basis of accommodation, to look at the near, for near vision or to look at the near object. Okay. Next, so we are done with these things. We are done in cranial nerve 1. We saw these three nerves together. We saw how are we going to test these nerves, right? All you need to remember is three types of visual abnormalities you see. Then the ocular muscles and the innervation of ocular muscles, obviously the function and the innervation of ocular muscles, right? Then you look at the examination of pupil. You need to remember the visual reflexes, right, which includes direct pupillary reflex and consensual or indirect pupillary reflex, and the accommodation reflex. In accommodation reflex, you need to remember these three things. Now this is an important question. They can ask you as a MCQ, or this could be asked as a theory question also. What is included in accommodation, or how does the accommodation happen? Now, as we are talking about accommodation right now, let's move to pathway of accommodation. Okay, how does accommodation happen? Now, if you have studied head and neck and neuroanatomy, you must know this. There is a visual pathway, right? Visual pathway is like this. Okay, I haven't mentioned the spaces less. So I haven't mentioned the whole visual pathway here, right? So visual pathway goes like this. When the light enters your eye, right? After it passes through cornea, lens, and it focuses on retina, right? After retina, it goes through cranial nerve 2, right? That is the optic nerve. It goes to the optic nerve. From optic nerve, the light has to go to the brain. How does that travel occur? The whole travel is the visual pathway. Okay. Now let's look at the visual pathway. I will just mention it. I don't have space so that to draw the whole pathway. So from optic nerve, it goes to the optic tract. From optic tract, it goes to the optic chiasma, right? From optic chiasma, it goes to the lateral geniculate body, right? It's like optic nerve goes to the optic chiasma. From optic chiasma, there is optic tract, which goes to the lateral geniculate body. From lateral geniculate body, the optic radiations go to the occipital region, or the visual area. I mentioned here, visual cortex in the occipital lobe. Okay. So optic nerve 2 goes to the optic chiasma. Optic tract goes to the lateral geniculate body. Lateral geniculate body optic radiation goes to the visual cortex of occipital lobe. Okay. So that is the whole visual pathway. Now, how does this accommodation occur? Now, pathway for accommodation reflex. Now, if the image, see I have mentioned here, if the image is closer than 6 mm, 6 meter, not mm, 6 meter, the image will be usually blurred, right? So, in order to focus that image, to make it clear, to get a clear vision of the image, accommodation should happen. So, how does this occur? From this whole visual pathway I mentioned, the image goes to the visual cortex in occipital lobe. From this occipital lobe, there is occipito-oculomotor fibers which go to the Westphal nucleus, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, right? From Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it goes via the cranial nerve 3. It goes to the ciliary body, and the ciliary body contracts, right? This is point number 1, and also point number 2 and 3 will happen. That is point number 1, 2 and 3. So occipito-oculomotor fibers goes to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is a oculomotor cranial nerve 3 nucleus, right? So from Edinger-Westphal nucleus via oculomotor nerve, that is cranial nerve 3, there will be contraction of ciliary body, which will cause relaxation of zonules. Relaxation of zonules will cause the lens curvature to increase, which will increase the power of the lens, which will increase the convergence of the lens. Hence, the rays from the near object which were not falling on retina will converge and it will fall on retina. Okay, due to increased power of the lens, right? As we all know, the lens is convex, so convexity will increase, right? So for example, if the lens was earlier like this, then it will become like this. Okay. So these three things happen. This is the pathway for accommodation reflex. Now let's look at the pathway for light reflex. What will happen again? Remember, we are just talking about that pathway, but there is a difference in the pathway here for light reflex. That is, when the light rays will come to retina, from that cranial nerve to optic nerve, from that it will go to pretectal nucleus, which is in the midbrain. Okay. Now pretectal nucleus, which is located in the midbrain, has connections on both sides. That is the ipsilateral and contralateral side of the eye. That is, for example, the light rays are received to the retina from the right eye. So from the right retina to the right cranial nerve second, okay, to the pretectal nucleus in the midbrain, which is connected to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus on both sides, left and right side. Okay, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is cranial nerve 3 nucleus, right? And from there, via the oculomotor nerve, that is cranial nerve 3, pupillary constriction will occur. Okay. So we know in pupils we have no constrictor and dilator muscle, right? So via that constriction will occur. Now this is the pathway for light reflex. So what you need to know is two pathways, right? These two pathways are very important, right? In light reflex, you need to know the pretectal nucleus in midbrain, which is very important, and Edinger-Westphal nuclei on both sides. The importance is this pretectal nucleus will send information to left as well as right. Okay, Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Hence, if there is light thrown into the right eye or the right pupil, the left pupil will also constrict, because pretectal nucleus will send information to the left side of Edinger-Westphal nuclei also. Even though the sensation or the light was reflected on the right eye only, but the left eye will also constrict. The pupil of left eye will also constrict, right? That is the consensual right reflex. Putting the light on one eye, the pupil on the second eye will also constrict, right? That is consensual right reflex. It happens due to pretectal nucleus, okay, which sends signals to both Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Okay, so this is the main important thing here. Now what will happen, I will give you a clinical example here, which is very important. Pretectal nucleus in midbrain, how if there is a damage or lesion at this point, what will happen? You will see a Argyll-Robertson pupil. This is usually seen in neurosyphilis. If the person is suffering from a neurosyphilis, then there will be a lesion in the midbrain pretectal nucleus, which will cause Argyll-Robertson pupil. Okay. Now, what will happen in Argyll-Robertson pupil? Accommodation reflex is present, but pupillary reflex is absent. Are you guys focusing what I said? Please check again. The name of the disease is Argyll-Robertson pupil. Okay. Argyll-Robertson pupil occurs due to neurosyphilis. Right? What are the characteristics of this? There is accommodation reflex which is present. Accommodation reflex. So this pathway is intact. This pathway is intact, but pupillary reflex is absent. Right? This pathway is not intact. There is a problem in pupillary reflex. Why? Because there is a region of pretectal nucleus, which is a very important part for pupillary reflex. There is no pretectal nucleus here, if you can notice. Right? So this accommodation reflex will be maintained here in the Argyll-Robertson pupil, but there will be a pupillary reflex absent in the Argyll-Robertson pupil in neurosyphilis. Okay. So this ends my discussion in cranial nerves 1, 3, 4 and 6. Okay. I suggest you to read more from your textbooks, have a better understanding of these nerves from your anatomy as well as physiology aspects, right? You look at the origin of these nerves, whether it is motor or sensory, and what is the function of these nerves. Okay, so this is a basic idea you need to have to check the patient on a clinical scenario. Okay, again go through this video once if you don't understand, right? And you guys can always contact me via WhatsApp if you have any doubts. Okay, thank you.